Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Some stuff coming up, but I wanted to make a video, some announcements and stuff, but I want to make a video about something I didn't talk about in the calendar a few days ago, but about Pain of Salvation. I've just some talk about, they played at the Midwinter Prague Festival in the Netherlands, I guess, yeah, over the last weekend, first weekend in February. Their first show in like 6 months or something like that. They've been like talked about putting on a new album, possibly titled The Deep End, for a few years now. And Daniel Gildenlow's active on social media somewhat. We talked about Star Wars and a lot of other stuff. I mean, stuff as a father. Some talk on when I shared this link for the set list. The set list was a lot of stuff from the last couple records, actually, Panther and in the Passing Light of Day. A few years ago, they did the Complete Perfect Element at Prague Power USA. That was a big deal. Some video online of that, but it was something that it would be. People are wondering, like, the passion, the interest that Daniel Gildenlow has compared to where he once was with Pain of Salvation. And certainly can be questioned, I guess. And I mean, I was a massive fan. I still really like them, but I wanted to share just sort of a. It's all hypothetical from my memory of the interviews. I used to read lots of interviews, see interviews with him, hear him on radio interviews and stuff like that, especially back in the early to mid 2000s. So you just backtrack the history of Pain of Salvation a little bit and where they are now, where they went with their quote unquote classic lineup. It wasn't really, but it was with the primary lineup for the first, would it be the first 5 records? So right after, I mean, they did the Perfect Element one, which was the album that got me and a lot of people into them. Played at Prague Power USA, and then they did a tour with Dream Theater, and they put out Remedy Lane in 2002, a couple years later. So, but they had made the Perfect Element Part 1. It was Part 1, so it was alluding there might be a second part. And I read at least one, maybe multiple interviews with Daniel Gildenlow around that time. It was also around the time he actually was slated to sing with OSI, which didn't happen, which he did. It was a 27-minute piece he did vocals for originally. And around that same time, he did the Led Zeppelin Hammer of the Gods tribute with Mike Portnoy in New York City. I went out to New York City to see that. It was really a great experience. But so after Remedy Lane, they did 12/5, the live. I didn't even grab that acoustic live album, and then they did B in 2004. But, you know, the curiosity still held on. And some people love B, some people didn't love B, didn't get B. Like, what about the Perfect Element Part 2? And at least once, maybe more than one interview, Daniel alluded to an orchestra, a specific orchestra that he intended, he wanted to work with to actually record the Perfect Element Part 2. I remember he's got like 3 or 4 albums in his head. B was one of them. The Perfect Element Part 2 was one of them. I don't know if what became Road Salts or something else ended up being one. I don't know about that, but he said that this orchestra he intended and needed really was only willing to record Perfect Element Part 2 had to be used, and it was like their schedule was really tight for many like years possibly to actually. It's kind of like a Pepe Deluxe thing, getting access to certain instruments. And so then what happened was B came out, of course. They toured for it. They did the film for it. They actually had a string section, like a mini orchestra, a chamber section for it. But it wasn't the same orchestra as far as what I remember. So then, of course, Scarsick comes out, which I think I have back there too. But Scarsick, I could pull. Do I have Scarsick? It's like a Pain of Salvation history video. Scarsick comes out. And then eventually, not that long after it comes out, it was slated as this is considered the Perfect Element Part 2. You know, the thing is that the allusion to the orchestra, at least, that he was talking about, doesn't seem to be present on this. So I have always wondered if Pain of Salvation, if that there's a chance that someday they could record whatever that album, whatever the idea is, it would resemble this or no, with the orchestra that he thought of, that he was intending to back in whenever that was, 2000, 2003, 2004. And also considering how things went with B and the kind of, polarizing, I think ultimately a lot of people did like B, but it was still not. The hardcore fans still didn't really get into it nearly as much. And what happened with Scarsick, and of course, right after B, his brother Christopher Gildenlow left, the bass player, and then right after Scarsick, the drummer that had been with them, I think since the beginning, since Entropia, Johan Langel left. They made the Perfect Element Part 2 with the orchestra that he had alluded to in that interview or interviews, could have where Pain of Salvation ended up going and being might have been different. I don't know. Scarsick probably would have been different at least, but if it would have been even called Scarsick. But you know, it's all coulda, what ifs and coulda, woulda, shoulda. You know, it's what happened. Parallel universe. But it is interesting to think, thinking about Pain of Salvation, where they're at right now. If we're gonna get another record at some point, or is it a long ways away still? It's all really contingent on what Daniel Gildenlow does with it. But it's interesting that between that and the OSI thing alone, those two things, you know, it's like, you know, what happened. You can't change what happened in history, but you can't change the past. But it is kind of fun to think about from a standpoint. But anyway, thank you for watching. Just a Pain of Salvation tidbit. What are your thoughts about what happened with Pain of Salvation? I'd love to hear that. Please leave a comment, give it a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.